Welcome back to the Magnetic Masculinity podcast. And lately we've been sort of zooming out and doing some more what some people might consider esoteric episodes or spiritual episodes. But as I head this weekend to Huntsville, Alabama for a really exciting conference with some of the top leaders on the planet and the top physicists, thought leaders, game changers who are redefining science and trying to remodel how we look at consciousness. And this week I've had a lot of questions about what is consciousness? How does consciousness work? Are we consciousness? How does manifestation work? How does psychic behavior work? And I think it'd be really helpful for me to share a really simple model to help everybody understand what some of this more modern science is showing us. On some people say we're in a simulation. So some people say this is a simulation. That's one way of looking at it, or this is a game, or we're incarnating on Earth School. Pick your metaphor. They're all valid metaphors. So I thought that it would be helpful to share this to help us understand what does all of this new science, what is quantum physics and quantum mechanics and all of these new experiments, what are they showing us? What are they telling us that is so in alignment with what mystics and leaders and spiritual leaders of the past have always said? So I think this would be an exciting episode. So what is consciousness? Consciousness, we used to believe, was generated in our brains. We thought, I have thoughts and thoughts live in my brain, which is sometimes true, sort of. And my neurons and whatever's happening in my vehicle of consciousness in the supercomputer is generating me as a human. So let's look at it in a more modern way, in a simple metaphor, which is what I love to do, is take giant complex things and whittle them into simple metaphors. So, and I know I've said this before, but we're going to go a little more in depth. So Austra, our amazing co-host, and myself are like computers. Okay, so these vehicles have computers in them. Now, we could almost look at the whole body like a computer, but we break it into our vehicle of consciousness metaphor to help us more easily understand. But this computer, say you are a computer and I am a computer. In a computer, it has its own set of software, correct? That's our experiences before the age of 7, our beliefs of our parents, whatever we were exposed to, whatever our proclivities are with our own individual personalities or astrological signs or Myers-Briggs personality profile, whatever you prefer. So each computer is individual. It's unique. It has different programming, different software. And that computer was made of consciousness, but consciousness itself is everything. So we could look at that like the World Wide Web, the internet. There is infinite possibilities. There is so much information there in the Akashic records, the internet, whatever you call it, the generator, the quantum computer of the simulation. And no different than in a computer, some people might be temporarily disconnected from the World Wide Web or believe that they are, or they just don't know that the World Wide Web exists. Some people like me are on fiber optic, and I can sort of browse, boop, boop, boop. I can browse the internet very effectively. Some psychics are very good at pulling information from outside of their mind, outside of the computer, from the internet, the worldwide database. And some people are still on dial-up, and that's okay too. So realizing that we have our own unique software, but that no different than a computer, what I type into my version of Google trains my version of Google on my computer, what I like to think about and do. So I would attract thoughts or pop-ups on my browser that are in alignment with what I spend my time doing, because the algorithm is personalizing that giant amount of information to suit me, right? And yours is suiting you. So if you and I start typing into our browser, so say for instance, somebody like me that's like pretty happy most of the time and I find lots of positive things. If I type love into my browser, it's going to pop up with like how love changes the world, or, you know, the mechanisms of love, or some Psychology Today articles are going to pop up in my browser. And if somebody who, say, not that there's anything wrong with this, but somebody who is struggling and has forgotten their connection to source, or disconnected from the World Wide Web, or their vehicle of consciousness itself has crappy software, and they're trying to access the database from crappy software on their computer, and it got too many tabs open, and they're searching for violent video games and Fox News and political drama and reality shows and like judging people and trolling people from home or whatever, if they type love into their browser, it's going to be like, do you love to play this video game? Or do you, it's going to be a different part of the algorithm that they are perceiving. But all of that information exists. And that's where some people call it the law of attraction. What you think about is what you get more of. Everything is available to you. Every option is available in that quantum supercomputer in the sky. It's not really in the sky, it's everywhere. But just to help us, just like the internet is everywhere, it's not just in the sky, but it's and we can get different quality of information from the database. So if you're from that World Wide Web, internet, God, source, consciousness. So again, remembering that we are all connected, just like we understand now in science that particles that have interacted together or have something in common, even when they're separated, they are still intrinsically connected. So we are all connected by this World Wide Web that also created us. So if we're feeling really crappy and thinking really crappy and speaking really crappy and thinking really crappy and not in a bad way, not in a judgmental way, but because we're shut down or wounded or whatever or ill, then the information that you're getting from the internet might not be the highest, level of consciousness available on that World Wide Web. And you could go to law school tomorrow. You could go to medical school tomorrow. You could come to America and stay with me for a month. You could train for another half marathon. You could do an ultramarathon. You could do all of those things. All of those possibilities are available to you. So when people say, all of those things are happening simultaneously, they're all available to you. They're all possible. And they all exist as probabilities or possibilities. But how you speak, what you think, the choices you make, and how you pilot your vehicle of consciousness, and how healthy all of those systems are in your vehicle of consciousness are going to determine whether you're tuning into, Enlightenment 101 station, or if you're tuning into the dark web type thing. Does that make sense? So if consciousness is everything and everyone, and it is creating everything, then we all have consciousness within us. This mug is made of consciousness. The celery juice that I'm drinking in the mug is made of consciousness. I'm made of consciousness. So that mute button is made of consciousness. So everything in our reality is made of consciousness. It is the fabric. So at the conference I'm going to be attending, one of the amazing researchers there, Tom Campbell, who we're doing a series with, is a NASA physicist who is performing scientific experiments to prove that we are, in his metaphor, in a simulation, which basically means consciousness is fundamental. That is your soul. Your soul is energy from consciousness temporarily. So, people hear it's a simulation and that kind of freaks them out. It's not real. It is very real. It means that individual unit of consciousness, that soul, is currently living in this vehicle of consciousness. You are piloting the vehicle of consciousness. You are not the vehicle of consciousness. You are working with that vehicle of consciousness to experience this. And consciousness, or the fabric of reality, the photons, the energy. We know that everything is made of energy. What is that energy? Well, we're using the word consciousness to describe that energy. So if we are made out of that energy, the soul, droplets of the ocean of consciousness, children of God, pick your metaphor, we are coming, quote unquote, down onto this planet to temporarily experience a physical third dimension experience. This is that computer that we're using that is attached to the World Wide Web in various levels of attachment and various areas of the World Wide Web, depending on our choices. Because what this vehicle of consciousness is meant to do is give us a physical third dimensional experience of creating our own reality. But since we forget we're in a simulation, because that's part of what's necessary to make the simulation work, is free will. So because we forget that, and we sometimes have our heart battery disconnected and our emotional navigation system is going wild, and we have suboptimal programming in our supercomputer, and our bodies are, the engine has been compromised by chemicals and crappy food and lots of things that reduce our signal and our connection, we forget, and we're not experiencing the full potential of what is available to all of us in that World Wide Web, because we are all parts of source on different paths, different logins. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions so far?
Oh yeah, plenty.
Okay,
So
okay. Let's do them. I love questions. It's my favorite activity.
So you started with saying that a lot of times consciousness feels like it's in our brain, but at the same time, it's not. Like how I'm just thinking, like, if it's, what do we think that it's in our brain? And if not, what does it actually is? And does it even matter where it is?
Okay, well, I love your question. Does it matter? I think for the sake of science, it matters, because we want science and mysticism and we want this great convergence of understanding a model for reality that allows everybody to be really good at playing the game and really winning at the simulation. Now, if we look at our brain as the computer that's logged onto the World Wide Web rather than the generator of it. So the computer, our brain, our nervous system, all of it together, this vehicle of consciousness that we're learning now how to pilot through this blueprint that I downloaded when I spent years out in the forest, silently contemplating and downloading this blueprint from the World Wide Web. We can have information that's stored on our hard drive, but a lot of information is coming from the World Wide Web, and our brain is what allows us to interface with consciousness. So our brain is what is allowing us to interpret that into a physical third dimensional experience. I think a thought, I am a powerful creator. I think a thought, everybody adores me. Source adores me. I feel one way. If I think everyone's listening to this thinking I'm a crazy lunatic, people are going to hate me and I'm going to get bullied like I did constantly in childhood, I get to experience that thought. Both of them are available to me. There's a billion, I didn't count them, but I'm saying there's a billion thoughts available to me at any given time. So that's why that's why the magnetic masculinity blueprint, or this blueprint that we've been outlining, is allows us to learn how to take over piloting that vehicle, so that we're not just unconsciously playing out the software in our computer brain and thinking that that's all that's available to us. So we want to get that programming in the supercomputer reprogrammed to more optimal programming, and we want to get it connected to the World Wide Web. And then we can experience playing the game or the simulation more skillfully. And that's when things get really, really fun. And we're like, oh, I get why I'd incarnate here. This is amazing.
Question on, you said that everything is available to you. Question would be, and I assume that there can be many people listening that might have that question, is what doesn't it feel like it, that everything is available?
Because you're working from software that was programmed before the age of 7. So again, 90 to 95% of our perceptual awareness, the thoughts we think, the choices we make, the patterns we experience over and over, and the words we speak and the feelings we have are based on subconscious programming in the supercomputer from before the age of, there's different, between 6 and 9, but up until that point. So computers run on familiar patterns. So the brain, one of the reasons that I teach my clients to train their brain is to understand that one of our jobs of the brain is to run things efficiently through familiar patterns. Electricity, which is what it is, takes the path of least resistance, the same as it does in your house, the same as water does. If there's a, water leak, there's a water leak in the main, it tries to take the path of least resistance. So if we have a neural pathway here, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. It's a lot easier for electricity to go that way, especially if our vehicle of consciousness has not been maintained well and does not have a full tank of premium fuel. So then we're asking it, I want you to think completely differently. Well, it's going to take some energy to go from here to, if I start trying to think this way, there's not a pathway there yet, right? It's like, I'm going to have to really, that takes more effort. Takes more effort and more time for me to create that. Whereas if I just go like this one time, bang, it's there back again. So it doesn't feel like it because you forget that you're a powerful creator. You forget that you're creating your reality. You forget when you incarnate that you are God, you are source, you are consciousness, because that's the way the game kind of needs to be played. Because if we knew, you wouldn't actually, therefore the system of consciousness itself wouldn't actually grow and evolve or have authentic free will experiences if you knew all that when you incarnated. It wouldn't be free will. It would be like a video game. It would be more like a Sims game where you're playing, I'm the mommy and the daddy and the this and that, which is true on some level, but wouldn't that be boring? And source itself would never grow or evolve or become more self-aware. So in order for source itself, or consciousness, the fabric of consciousness, which we're realizing is the fundamental fabric of reality itself, needs to give us free will in order to have that fun experience of creation. I can eat a bowl of organic watermelon, or I could stick this pen in my ear, or I could do whatever I want, and I get that feedback of what I'm doing. We get to make free will choices. It's just that a lot of us are making choices from our parts, from our ego, from fear, because we forget that we are connected to everything. And we get stuck in the patterns, aka the algorithms of what we've been typing into our browser the most. And we believe our thoughts. We think our thoughts are true instead of realizing that thoughts are like a pop-up on your computer, a browser. You might be like, oh, that's so interesting. Oh, there's somebody's offering me an opportunity to go to this amazing convention. Oh, yes, I'm definitely going to click on that. Or we might get one up. Hey, do you want to have, I don't know, something that does not resonate for me? That's our intrusive thoughts. We don't have to click on them, but often we click on them because a lot of people think they are their thoughts. They don't know the difference between, this is a buffet of information. Just because something exists on the internet doesn't mean it's helpful, doesn't mean it's true, and doesn't mean it resonates for me, and doesn't mean I want to click on it. But the more or a different way to look at it in spirituality, they would often say, You want to be high vibe, which can be used in a unhelpful way. But basically your vibration, how cohesive you are. So think of energy and chaos would be like this. And then you're connected to that part of the World Wide Web, maybe even the dark web, which is okay because it's all part of the web. It's all God. It's not judged. It's you that gets to choose. And then energy that's flowing like this and is like super amazing. And it's like energized in your vehicle of consciousness. You are programming the computer. Your heart battery is supercharged. Your body is filled with premium fuel and perfectly well maintained, that engine. Your emotions are constantly informing you of what needs to be reprogrammed in the brain. And you're flowing in that state, and you are driving that vehicle of consciousness on the path of your authentic alignment. You're going to be like, everything I type into the browser is just like, here, do you want this? Here you go. 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 And the world is going to become a mirror that you love looking in rather than a mirror that makes you go, ah.
Is there limits to that everything is available? Kind of one question would be, does it change from like dimension to dimension? Because I'm thinking, let's say if there's somebody who is in a wheelchair and they're like, well, walking is not available to me. How to kind of like, how would you explain, like, is there a limit to what's available? Or if there's not, how, let's say this person who is in a wheelchair that can't walk might approach it or might look at that situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll give you my best answer, and I don't know if it'll be a satisfying one. And I'm going to think through it as I talk, so I might change my mind mid-answer. So in a parallel timeline, which is a totally different conversation, there probably is a version of them logged on that is walking. And maybe it was a horrible, unfortunate accident that is part of being on this 3D planet that has a lot of like 8 billion people logged on. So there's bound to be some stuff. Or it could be a different scenario that they thought that being in a wheelchair, it might have been like that's just a horrible thing that happened because shit happens on a planet with that many people logged on, and it can be a little bit chaotic because we're kind of a high entropy, unevolved species. Or it could be that maybe their oversoul, their higher self, thought, hey, when I go to Earth School or when I log on to the game, I bet you if I have that avatar, that type of vehicle of consciousness, I'm going to be really forced to focus on the mind or something. So it could be either, but we never go, but what we do not do to people is we go, oh, well, you chose this. That's not helpful or kind. These are just different perspectives to reflect that perhaps you were a very advanced player of the game. So in order to grow and learn more in the game, you were like, I'm not in a kindergarten experience anymore. I want to really push my growth. So am I going to go think of like a professional tennis player, and they want to get better because they're amazing at tennis, but they've kind of like reached what they can do at their local tennis club. Are they going to go play some high school kids down the road? Or are they going to be like, no, I want the hard one. I want to play the Williams sisters, or I don't know a lot about sports, so I was going to name, and that's the only tennis players I know. But, you know, it might be that you are a very powerful soul who chose to come into a very advanced game. Just like there are Marines who are like, hey, I'm volunteering to go to this other country and I'm going deep undercover and I'm going to swim through hard water. It might be that. So in a parallel timeline, there could be an option available to them where they walk. Now, if they don't believe there's any chance for them, there wouldn't be. But we also don't want to be like, oh, if I believe I can walk, even if I have this, this, and this, it'll happen. maybe that's, I guess a different question would be, why would they want to walk? Obviously, they would maybe want to walk. But maybe a different question would be, what can you do right now to feel really happy and fulfilled, if there is no chance that you can change that? Now, if you just give up, like I have been told before, that my knee was inoperable, that I would never be able to bike again, that I would never walk upstairs, and that my pain was just going to get progressively worse and worse because of the condition that I was born with, the rule set that I chose for this game. And so I try not to believe other people's limiting beliefs about my reality. And it sort of makes me go, oh, really? Watch me. Which is why I've overcome so many impossible to cure things. But I think a different question would be, maybe don't make your happiness contingent on something that is a harder part of the rule set. Some people's answer to that question would be, if you truly believed with every part of every bit of your brain, mind, and soul that you could walk, you could. I don't know, because I haven't tested that. But the challenge there would be, it would be so hard for most people that have not worked as hard on brain training and mind mastering to collapse those timelines and experience that parallel reality. People would call that quantum leaping or whatever, but because there would be a lot of you that doesn't believe that's possible. So again, I haven't tested that to that extreme. I don't always know exactly where that line is, because we are also in a physical rule set, right? So everything is made of probabilities. Everything is changeable. In fact, energy, by the very nature of being energy, changes. That's what energy does. It moves. But it would take a lot of free will, a lot of our time and attention, to turn this consciousness manifested as a watermelon into a pen. So there is a line somewhere of rule sets on the planet. It's like, if I don't believe in gravity, it doesn't apply to me. Well, it does, because we're also a collective reality. So, and we are in complex biological avatars that have a lot of rule sets that we on the planet have barely started to understand. Is that a reasonable answer?
Yeah, and I also have a follow-up question here, because the next question would be, with, let's say, somebody identifies something that they feel or have identified that they might not be able to change. How to know if that's actually not changeable in like where they are at right now, or whether it's just them putting some limits on themselves?
Whew, that's another great question. I think it's helpful to always assume we're putting some limitations on ourselves. Because if we think it's bad to put limitations on ourselves, our brain will be like, I don't do that, because we think that's bad. So I always say, in what ways? So I sort of circumvent that, or by going, in what ways am I creating beliefs or biases that are preventing me from experiencing that which I prefer? And I also think, if you're not sure, it could be optimal to spend your focus of attention on something that does bring you joy, something that you feel you can change, and start giving yourself evidence. And remember that things are not always as we see. Like, for instance, one of my favorite classic tools for people that are struggling to experience this like simulation our body is creating, how we perceive things. Put your thumb in front of you, like about this far, look at it, close one eye, look at it, look at where it is on the screen. Now open your other eye, and it's completely in a different spot, right? It's like, and our brain is then taking that information, putting it together, and showing us where we are. So how we perceive things is not the only way to perceive things. It's the way we are perceiving things. But you can think of something I mean, if somebody wants proof that they can change, now, can I change that I have 2 ears and, um, I don't know, 10
Eye
fingers? I
color.
mean, I could probably change those things. Would they make me happy? And why do I want to change? That's another important question to ask. Do I want to change because I'll be happy when? Or do we want to change because we're like, I want more? Because that's okay. So it's looking at why we want to change. And then you can have proof that you can change. Look at how much change I've seen happen in you in the couple of years we've known each other. You've completely changed the way you view reality. You've completely changed your beliefs about yourself. You've completely changed your self-image. But would you have thought that was possible 10 years ago?
Or 10 years ago, definitely not.
Right.
Follow-up question that I have with what you said about the kind of like when we write in the World Wide Web, we write the information that kind of suits us, or sometimes it might not even be like conscious what we type in there.
That's a good distinction right there. That's a very good distinction right there. Yes.
Well, maybe you can talk on that first then.
Well, since most of us are, these terms that I hear, I don't think are fair or kind or loving, but people say people are unconscious or asleep, or I would call it they're running in the old software. So they're not piloting their vehicle of consciousness. They're kind of thrown in the trunk, taken on a ride by the level of by the vehicle of consciousness, and their level of awareness is very low. So they're not aware of their thoughts. So they're not even aware, you know, like when I ask people, tell me like what kind of thoughts you've thought today, they're usually like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, how many times a day do you think I'm not good enough, or that person's judging me? Or, if we're not aware of our thoughts, then we're not conscious about what we are contributing to the World Wide Web. Because remember, we're not only downloading from the World Wide Web, the same as any algorithm that we are a part of. Each computer, your computer, my computer, if we're logging into ChatGPT or we're logging into Google, we're both contributing. We're contributing to what's in the World Wide Web. This is a consensus reality, right? Because it wants to give us free will. So we're contributing to the internet as well as downloading from it. And what I try to be very intentional about what I contribute to the World Wide Web, because I want to be very present with what other people might download. So I prefer, even if there's something happening in reality that I don't prefer politically or whatever, I don't pretend it doesn't exist. I just am very conscientious that if I want those things that I do not prefer to catch up, then the more I add of acceptance and appreciation and gratitude and acceptance and authenticity to the World Wide Web, the more I give other people permission to download that. And that doesn't mean being only love and light and only in gratitude. Everything we feel is valid. This is an inclusionary universe. It allows for all of our experiences to be valid, because all of our experiences inform us on our free will choices. It's a feedback system. And we don't want to disconnect that emotional navigation system, because we want that feedback system. That's the feedback system that tells us if the software is good or if the software needs an update.
So with that typing, like it's ideal that we know kind of what to type or how to do the typing. But before even like going there, like how to know what is it that you're actually already typing and what is it that would be like a better thing to type, how to identify or see those.
Okay, first, I think there's another distinction that we need to acknowledge. Let's look at a thought. A thought is a piece of information. Okay, it's an option. It's a flavor of the buffet. Now, a thought can come from the World Wide Web. The thought could come right from God or your higher self or an archangel who are like the C-suite of this particular simulation. Or the thought could be from your husband or your neighbor, or could be just floating around in the World Wide Web because a bunch of people right now are like, I'm afraid of this or that. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm afraid of this or that. Or a thought could be right in that computer itself. So it could be coming from the World Wide Web, or it could be coming from the particular software installed on that computer that you are currently playing in that vehicle of consciousness. So I think not what I don't want anybody to do, that I've definitely done, and that I see a lot of people when they come to me, I don't want you to be afraid of your thoughts. Your thoughts are fine. They're nothing. They're just information. Again, if you don't click on it, it doesn't matter. So people are often afraid of their intrusive thoughts. Oh, I hope my husband gets hit by a lightning because he didn't put the toilet seat down. I don't know. Oh God, now I'm going to have created him getting hit with lightning with my thoughts. No, you're not. Now, if you're constantly thinking thoughts about harming someone else, you might want to look at why, and you might want to investigate it without judging yourself. And definitely what we want to be more conscientious of is the thoughts that we act on. So we either believe a thought or we question a thought. And remember, there is a quadrillion, I counted them this morning, there is a quadrillion thoughts in the World Wide Web. And they're all going to flop in your presence to give you choices. But just because a thought presents itself to you does not mean that you need to act on it. You know, I might have thoughts like, this podcast is really stupid. It's not going to help anybody. What a waste of time. It's going to be embarrassing, whatever. I could have those thoughts, but if I act on those thoughts, you know, are those thoughts necessarily true? Maybe. But even if they are, that's okay. Because what if there's one person who's like, which we've had a lot of people who are like, that has changed my life, and I listen every week. So, you know, there could be thoughts like, my husband doesn't appreciate me. But if I look around my life, I'm like, that is some nonsense. This guy appreciates me and cherishes me every day. And that would be old software that's running in my mind, right? So I want to question I just want to question, is the thought helpful or unhelpful? Does the thought make me feel great, or does the thought make me feel terrible?
How to control which thoughts you act on? Because on paper makes sense. Don't act on thoughts that are not serving you. Act on thoughts that are. But what are some of the processes or some of the things to keep in mind when it happens in a moment, especially if you add the flavor of emotion there as well? How to start to make, or maybe one step to act on thoughts that are not serving you, and then start to act on thoughts that are.
Well, the first and most important step that we always want to celebrate is awareness. So first, we want to train ourselves to become aware of our thoughts. And then we don't want to become afraid of them. We don't want to resist them. And I don't want anybody out there to think, oh, I have to avoid that negative thought, because what we resist persists. Think of it more like something that's kind of funny, like, here's a thought. Is that one helpful? Does acting on that thought make me feel really good and empowered and happy and loving? Or does it make me feel vindicated, or like, does it make me feel like, good, I can punish that person, or I can show that person, you know? The first step is awareness, and training ourselves, as I always say exhaustively, either you master your mind or your mind is mastering you. You train your brain or your brain is training you. Don't judge the thoughts. Don't be afraid of the thoughts, even if they're really intrusive, nasty, rotten thoughts. Everybody has intrusive thoughts. They're hilarious. Don't worry about it. Sometimes people in my circle will come around to me because they know this, and they'll be like, I had an intrusive thought today. I'll be like, great, tell me about it. And they'll be like, I thought this, and I could do this, and I could do that, but I'm definitely not going to do that. I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. Great. Good. So the first thing we want to do, the first thing is awareness of awareness. So the first step is becoming aware that there is even awareness or absence of awareness, right? Because if something is subconscious, by the very nature of being subconscious, it's below the level of your awareness. So training awareness takes time, it takes patience, and it's going to take a ton of failure. And you're definitely going to act on crappy thoughts. But over time, you're going to act on them less often. And you're going to catch them. So I can almost all the time observe my thoughts. So I can process a lot of information at the same time. So I can watch what I'm downloading. I can question the validity of the source of the download. I can watch what my mind thinks. And I can watch the information that's coming from my hard drive. I can look at the information that's coming from the World Wide Web, and I can observe all my thoughts at the same time and be like, oh, part of me is thinking this, and part of me is thinking this, and part of me is thinking this. But that's, I don't know everybody on the planet, but I don't think that's a realistic initial expectation of yourself. And it's just something I've always been really good at. My brain is just like processes lots of information at once. And because I've known about non-local information since childhood, I've been practicing that for decades. And I spent lots of time in childhood without that having that word, but I spent a lot of time in childhood in meditation and contemplation. I have literally moved away from the city, left everything behind, and spent years in silence and isolation in a forest. So don't expect yourself to do that if you're raising kids, going to work, and, just start trying to be aware and just start observing your thoughts and say to yourself, where did that come from? Who did that come from? And you don't even have to know the answer. All it's doing is trying to train yourself that you're not your thoughts. So that's one method. I don't know who came up with it, but I heard once that I thought could be helpful for clients is when you think like, oh, look at that. I don't know what's happening outside. Look at that male lady driving the car, drinking her soda. Soda's terrible. You say, oh, who does that belong to? And you're just sort of training your brain over time to separate. You want to zoom out and observe the thoughts. You don't want to be the thoughts. You want to become the writer, producer, and director of the movie, not just the star who doesn't get to write the script, right? You want to pilot your vehicle of consciousness. So awareness is really your first and most important step. So anytime you're in awareness, even if you're like, oh, I'm aware that I'm being a belligerent asshole today and that I'm taking it out on everybody, then you instantly shift to, and now I'm in awareness. I couldn't choose my behavior when it was subconscious, right? Or if we swap that over to our parts work model, if you're not familiar with that, go back and listen to one of our earlier episodes about parts work. So again, if we have all these aspects of our personality that need a seat at the table of our consciousness and get a chance to hold the talking stick, if we're not if we haven't done our integration work and we have a lot of our subconscious parts not getting their needs met, they're going to do a hostile takeover. So then we might look back and go, whoa, I was in a hostile takeover. I wasn't able to make a choice in that moment because I was unconscious, right? It's like when we get triggered in our relationships and we're like, whoa, sorry for what I said when I was unconscious. I acknowledge that impacted you, but yeesh, and some part of us just gets like, and we just like, yeah. And then we try to justify those behaviors by saying, you did this or that, and that made me this or that, instead of just going, whoa, I now have awareness on where I did not previously have awareness. That's amazing. I just leveled up. Same as when we eat our shit sandwiches. I just leveled up in the simulation. That's great because I didn't used to know this. We don't beat ourselves up for what we did when we didn't know better. We didn't know. As Tesla said, you don't know what you don't know until you know. We're not born in full awareness. The goal of this experience of consciousness is to be ever expanding awareness. So by that very nature, it implies that you have to be here before you can be here. So when you get here, don't go, oh, I can't believe I was there. Go, huh, I was being a belligerent jerk and now I'm not. That's amazing.
What
What can I learn from that?
with now that we went down the thoughts, what is the link with the thoughts to that kind of identifying what is it that I'm currently like writing in the World Wide Web, or what is it that I should be writing?
Well, you can go by how you feel. You can go by, am I enjoying my life? Do I have fulfilling relationships? Do I feel like I have purpose, and do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel content? Do I feel accepting of others? How often do I feel agitated? How often do I feel triggered? How often do I feel disappointed, jealous, upset? Again, we don't judge any of those things. They're helpful information that our navigation system is informing us. Your navigation system is constantly informing you whether the computer is running great software or so. Yeah, you look at your life, you look at, hey, can I spend a week around my parents and feel amazing? Or, or am I constantly judging other people? Are other people constantly disappointing me? That's a big one. Other people are disappointing me. That means that we are writing a script for other people in our mind movie. Okay, today Elstra is going to show up for our podcast and she's going to say, wow, Sandy, I like your pink necklace. And then she's going to say, you're a genius. And blah, blah, blah. And then if you don't do that, I'm like, I'm disappointed in Elstra that she's whatever. So how often are we disappointed in others? How often, how often do we feel triggered, upset, agitated, fearful? So our fear and our beliefs, our fear is very helpful. Fear is a very great way to help us understand where we still have some crappy software that can be optimized to help us align with that which we already are, which is source consciousness.
And with that, typing into the World Web, how to know if what you are typing kind of you are in charge of, instead of your beliefs or thoughts or something that might not be like you?
So again, I would almost give the same answers to the last question.
Okay.
I would say, how do you feel? How, and do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel energized or do you feel drained? Do you feel hopeful or do you feel trapped? Do you feel connected or do you feel alone? Do you feel inspired or do you feel like a victim? And remember that who you are, is constantly changing. Our personality is not who we are. A lot of people, when they come to me, as you know, we work a lot with men in tech. A lot of them come to me and they're like, well, people at work don't like me. I'm not, I don't make a lot of friends. The girls don't dig me. I'm like, okay, well, let's look at your personality. And that can feel like a personal attack. But for instance, if you have software in childhood that you're a loser, nobody likes you, you have bad listening skills because maybe you have ADHD. So if your personality, if your behavior, don't confuse your behavior with your personality. And your personality can change. You can program a new personality, not in a fake way. That's not being inauthentic, but it's nobody's authentic self to sort of be kind of sullen and like give one word answers and not, when I walk up to somebody, I'm like, hi, tell me about yourself. Like, what's your superpower? And I listen, and emotionally I'm present with them. But would anybody want to listen to me on this podcast if I sat here like this? I don't know, Austra, I guess. Yeah, it's fine. Know what I mean? So is your personality who you are? I don't know. Is it a helpful one or is it not a helpful one? Now, of course, we have our own natural inclinations towards like introversion, extroversion, our astrological signs or our Myers-Briggs signs or our, what's the other one that's really popular right now? The, I don't know, whatever all of them are. They're all valid. That things that we do to try to help us understand ourselves. But I always say, and remember, That's the rule set you came in with. That's like the avatar you chose, you know, the same as if you're in a video game, you're like, I want to play an avatar that has this characteristic and that characteristic and this quality and that quality, because I think if I play those qualities, that's how I'm going to enjoy playing this game. And sometimes people want to play the same character over and over in their video game. And sometimes they're like, I want to try a different avatar. I want to try a fairy who can evaporate, or I want to try a giant who's strong, or I want to try this or that. That's kind of how incarnation works too, by the way.
Can you talk a bit more on the free will and maybe its link to consciousness?
Yeah, so free will is an important one because that is the necessary rule set for the system itself to evolve. We need to have free will. We need to, again, it would be the ultimate loneliness if source consciousness played all the characters. Think about if you were playing a Sims game and you're like, I make the mommy like this, I make the daddy like this, I make the neighbor like this, I make the neighbor like that. Would you feel actually fulfilled if you played all the characters? Long term, would you feel lonely if you're all the characters? That's awful. So in order to actually interface with the other characters and understand them and have a more rewarding experience, you need free will. But what I remind people is that most people are not acting from their free will. They're acting from subconscious programs, fear, and repetitive patterns. So they're not typically making free will choices. They kind of are, but they're not like, what choice should I make? They're just running on autopilot. So that vehicle of consciousness is on autopilot, and it's on autopilot with whatever food made us feel comforted. It's on autopilot with whatever emotional connection we had with the heart battery. It's on autopilot. We want to take it off autopilot and we will learn how to pilot it, and we want to pilot it on the path of our authentic alignment, which our navigation system constantly gives us feedback for, that emotional navigation system.
You also said that.
And if people are listening that don't understand that metaphor, we talk about it a lot. You can find previous episodes on your vehicle of consciousness, which is just a metaphor I created to help our brains very quickly and effectively adopt a more multidimensional model to keep up with the evolutionary shift that we're experiencing in humanity.
So you mentioned that we get to choose, even like with what we're typing in. So question would be, if somebody listening might not like something in their life, the question is, did they choose that? And also, what's the role of, because in some ways I'm thinking also, what's the role of accountability within that? Even if they might feel like it's not something that they chose, did they actually choose it, or like does responsibility or accountability come in there?
That is a great question. And I think it's important to use a lot of emotional intelligence and compassion when we ask those questions, because here's what I've heard it look like that I don't prefer. Well, you chose to have cancer, so, you know, what are you going to do about that kind of thing? Or like, oh, they chose it, not my problem. That's not optimal. Also, remember that we're a multidimensional species. So things can be true at different levels. So on a higher meta level, I chose this avatar that I'm in. And I have had a lot of biological, chemical, and electrical malfunctions in this avatar. So while it's true that I chose this, it's not helpful to say to your little 3D human parts, you chose this. It doesn't. So yes, I chose this. And if a little part of me is like, really another diagnosis, like what? Sometimes in order to move back into that higher perspective, I have to meet myself where I'm at and let that human part of me be like, no fair. I don't want this. This isn't fair. I hate this. And then zoom out into your higher perspective. Remember, we're multidimensional species, so it's an and reality, not an or reality. And we don't want to take that information and say, well, I chose this. It's my fault. I'm terrible. Why did I choose this? And beat ourselves up. It's more like, hey, I used to choose really abusive relationships that perfectly reflected to me that I did not yet develop self-worth. So perhaps that mirror of the abusive relationships I chose, that I also chose to leave, or that I've participated in, I would like all of us to assume that we've also hurt others, at least most of us. I definitely have been hurtful or suboptimal in relationships where I've hurt men. So I want to be accountable for that. But in what ways were those men and I choosing to play those dances? Well, energetically, they're a perfect match because it means he has terrible self-esteem and I have terrible self-esteem. So I'm going to maybe choose those over and over and over and over and over again. So from our higher self perspective, it's kind of perfect, because if we have a big festering wound and we're just like going through life going, nothing here to see, and the goal is to level up in the simulation, and source is like, or consciousness is like, okay, yeah, you got this, and your higher self's like, we got this, but then your human self is like, I'm not looking at that. So sometimes it'll like pry our fingers open and be like, poke, 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 and we'll be like, no, no, and we'll just keep doing the same thing. So it'll be like, okay, I love you, poke, 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 and we're like, ow, that person hurt me. But sometimes from our oversoul, our higher source perspective, it's like poke, poke, poke. Okay, wait, what? Oh, I have a giant festering wound there. And without somebody poking it and it hurting, I might have not ever attended to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
Oh yeah, so we do choose things, but there's also things happening on the planet that are cause and effect, that are more under a Newtonian part of that, the Newtonian puzzle piece of a much larger puzzle, which is that a lot of people are suffering with health conditions that are caused not by their past lives or their emotions, although our emotions can contribute to illness, because cortisol and not having our heart battery charged does damage the vehicle of consciousness. But we have a lot of malfunctions in our brain. We have lots of hormone disruptors in our environment. We have, I tell people I am your canary with all of the conditions and the chemical sensitivity I have. I can walk into somebody's home and be like, I can spot 100 things in this house that we know cause cancer. So did I choose cancer? No, you did not. But you can choose to do your best to heal. And you can choose to eat healthier foods. And you can choose to be in a more fulfilling relationship. And you can choose to remove things from your environment that contribute to cancer. And you can choose to eat differently. And you can choose to think differently. And you can choose to lay down and die, or you can choose to use it to inspire other people, or you can choose to use it as a catalyst for change, and you can choose to fight. Those are your choices. So you still have free will choices within that thing that happened to you that definitely absolutely sucks and is not your fault, but you do have the power to hopefully change if it's not too late in the probabilities. But I believe that when everything in your vehicle is working well, it's easier to pilot it to an outcome you prefer, which is why I have been able to overcome quote unquote incurable things, or that I have so many conditions that I on most days don't suffer. I do suffer. I have spent years pretty much bedridden and had to have people help me go to the bathroom and not been able to drive a car. But I'd say I'm thriving. But I have organic bedding. I use unfragranced everything. I do not eat at restaurants ever. I don't see it as an act of restriction. I see it as an act of love. I enjoy it. I wouldn't do it any other way now. Instead of having bacon and eggs for breakfast and gluten, I eat fruit. I make sure that I eat greens 6 times a day. I look in my environment and I say, what are all the things that contribute to cancer and what are all the things that reduce cancer? I limit those and I double down on these.
also question on when making decisions, or decisions probably is a good example there. Like what should people listening focus more on? Intuition or that software or brain?
That's a great question. So I've been in both sides of that pendulum swing, and we could call that a left brain, right brain analogy, but understanding what we understand about the brain now, it's not that simplistic. So I'd like to acknowledge that it's not what we used to think. This is left brain and this is right brain. That's not actually how the brain works, but it's a metaphor that people will understand. So I have been in the place where I am like, everything I do is intuitive and logic is beneath me because that is very 3D and I'm too advanced for the brain. I get all my information from source, which I have been in those states. And when I'm really connected, when I've reached samadhi or enlightenment or bliss states through silent contemplation and really focusing on my vehicle of consciousness, I can access a lot of information. I've been in states where I can access turn-by-turn navigations to a location I've never been. Should I turn left or right? And it's like, turn left. Now, would it be helpful to stay in those states all the time? No. So when I got pulled out of those states, all of a sudden I was like, wait, what? Hey, hello, where are you? Like, tell me everything to do. And it was like, laughed at me and said, no. You're abusing it because you also need to have free will. I'm not here to give you all the answers. I'm like, oh, that's fair. And we also want to question, is the knowledge I'm getting intuitively from my subconscious parts? We're like, definitely, you should intuitively go into that relationship with a narcissist that, so we need to learn first to discern between our subconscious and our intuition. So the less fearful we are, the more integrated we are, the better our intuition becomes. It's like anything, right? And then I've also been in states where I'm like, I logic everything. I do everything the hard way. I don't listen to that stuff. You're out of here, buddy. And then I do everything logically, everything left brain. And I think like any data, it's helpful data. So I get a data point from there. I get a data point from here. I run them through the computer and then I make the best free will choice I can. So if I can get this data point and this data point, and I can assess the quality of information because I know that my mind, hang on, I have to pee really bad. And when I come back, we're going to talk. Okay, so when we're making decisions, we want to look at the quality of information. So am I going like the same as if you're like, hey, Google, blah, blah, blah. You want to look at that data. You want to see how good that data is. And you want to know how good your thinking is. Now, my thinking, I have really exceptional logic, and I don't actually give a you know what if I'm right or not. I care about accurate information because I know we're in an information-based virtual reality. So therefore, it's more important to me that I have accurate information to make my choices. But when I was more in ego, not that we're villainizing the ego, love the ego. When I was more in ego or fear, we'll call it, my brain would justify things or it would logic to defend its position. So in that case, if I know I have a bias about something, I'm going to try to factor in that bias. So it's all, there's nothing wrong with getting information from the World Wide Web, but are you getting it from a good quality place in the World Wide Web? There's no problem getting information from your hard drive, but is it good quality information on the hard drive? Is it fearful information or is it loving information? And is it information? I always try to look for what I call triple wins: a win for me, a win for you, and a win for consciousness or God. So I'm like, if this is a win-win-win for everybody and the information supports that, then that's makes me feel good to take an action step with my free will.
How to know if the information is high quality or whether to challenge it or continue searching or...
Great question. If you can figure out the exact answer to that, we'll probably be billionaires, and then we can hire people to do all kinds of things and we can help more people more quickly. Isn't that the $1 million question? I think trial and error and working on your magnetic masculinity blueprint, working through it 5 or 6 times or working through it once a year, assuming that you always maybe have some unintegrated parts because you're always evolving, right? So that means there's always a part of you that can grow, not from a place of I have to grow and evolve because I'm not good enough, but from a place of I would like to level up in the game because I'm amazing and I deserve it. And I want to represent the God or goddess that I am. And I honor the God and the goddess in all of you, even those of you that are still in fear. So over time, the more we become less fear and more love, the baseline of consciousness is love. So when we become less fearful, more integrated, more objective, more aware, higher vibe, pick your metaphor, the information is going to get better. So you could ask yourself, does this information, well, no, you can't ask yourself, actually. You can't ask, I was going to say, ask yourself if it makes you feel good. But don't do that, actually, because you might be like, well, should I go get a pizza? Your body would be like, yeah, that feels good. That idea feels good. Eating broccoli idea doesn't feel good. So that's not actually always a good indicator. You could ask yourself, like, okay, this is going to sound absurd, but you could ask yourself, somebody you know really well, what would Sandy do? Or what would somebody that I know and respect do? Or would I advise this to, if the Buddha came to my house and said, Austra, I think I'm going to do this or that, would you be like, yes, definitely. So somehow pulling ourselves out, zooming out, I call it. I'll sometimes say to my husband, whoa, wait a minute. I recognize that I'm going unconscious. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And I need to start sorting thoughts. So I start sorting thoughts into different piles. Okay, this thought is definitely not true. I start challenging them. I start sorting them into different folders on my hard drive. I'm like, boop, 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 boop. I take a few deep breaths and I'm like, okay, now I need to zoom out. And I literally imagine my perspective zooming out and going, okay, over time, you can tell when you're reactive or in fear. And that can be a good indicator that the information you're getting from your hard drive might not be the best quality information.
How do you, like you mentioned that that you're starting to go unconscious. How do you know that? How do you identify that?
Well, I'm going to tell you, at first, you're not going to. At first, you're just going to go unconscious. You're just going to be triggered. People call that triggered or whatever, Have you ever been in a conversation with like a friend and they're like, oh, I was such and such. And all of a sudden you're just like, you're jealous or judging or something. You're not like, oh, here I go. You're just bang. It's like wherever we have an old wound and there's no judging ourselves for judging ourselves. So don't judge yourself if you're judging yourself. If you're judging yourself, that's fine. But where we go unconscious, quote unquote, which I acknowledge is a strange term because it's not like when you're hit on the head and you go unconscious, but it's a valid metaphor. So when we go unconscious or we go out of awareness, out of free will into, or as you and I would call it in our model, a hostile takeover, right? All of a sudden a party was like, you said what to her? And that part is like, boom. And we're not reacting from our highest self. We're reacting from a program or a fear. So when you're starting, what I would advise or offer you to consider is noticing when you're not triggered anymore. So if you can go, whoa, I was unconscious. So you might ask yourself before bed, in what ways today did I fall from grace? In what ways today did I become unconscious? Not judging yourself, but celebrating the awareness and celebrating, oh, okay, I was unconscious and now I'm in awareness. So don't focus on, oh, I was unconscious. Focus on, I'm now in awareness. And that's training your brain and giving it a reward that's sort of where you want to be. So over time, you're kind of like, bringing it back to, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to be. So you want to focus a lot on, whoa, I'm in awareness. Whoa, I'm in awareness. And then we have that trigger protocol that I help people when they have become triggered, what to do about it and how to move through it and how to learn what valuable, priceless information was contained within that trigger to teach us about our authentic wants, needs, boundaries, and values, or where our festering wounds are. So there's a lot of value in triggers. So we don't want to look at them and be like, oh, it's bad to be triggered or unconscious. We want to celebrate the awareness that we were that way. And over time, you'll maybe start catching it. Like I'm sort of like, here I go. There's just a couple of things that I know will get me every time that I'm working on, because I don't get triggered or go unconscious very often. It's only in my deepest, most intimate, personal, vulnerable relationship with my husband that I can even get triggered. And I know what certain things are, and they're not his fault. He's not responsible for them. He was perfectly, divinely placed, because otherwise I never would have looked where those festering wounds were. So eventually, when we become conscious enough, we can be like, okay, I acknowledge that I was unconscious earlier, and that might have impacted you. It wasn't your fault. Will you work on it with me? Or here's what it taught me, or thank you. We could eventually be thanking people when they trigger us. Thank you. I was judging you, and without you, I would never have become aware of this or that. It's all just information. People like me with Asperger's are great at this because we're brutally honest. We're like, I don't want to make up all these social things. I just want to tell the truth. Do you think I look fat in this? Yes. I don't think it's very flattering look for you. That's why men like working with me, because I'm very direct. And I'm very to the point.
Speaking on men, like how does consciousness can help or support when it comes to masculinity or magnetic masculinity?
Well, again, I think the blueprint is a method, one method to come into that alignment as a multidimensional man, right? This is why that group program I created, or my super exclusive one-to-one, is the multidimensional man. It's training you how to pilot that vehicle of consciousness so that you're not unconscious more, so that you are choosing to pilot it on your path of alignment. And when you are in that state, you're less triggered, you're less fearful, you're stress resilient, trigger proof, you're inspired, you're emotionally masterful, you're present. And when you're like that, people want to be around you. Your women or your partner of whatever gender are going to feel safe around you. The people that work for you or work with you are going to admire you and be inspired by you. You're going to feel fulfilled, right? Because a lot of my clients have checked all these boxes, but they still don't feel fulfilled. And they're like, I thought when I had $1 million, it'd be fulfilling. I thought when I had $5 million, I thought when I had 20 Bitcoin, I thought when I got a bigger house, I thought when I got a girlfriend, I thought it would be more fulfilling, right? So again, how we know where we are is by our relationships with others and how we feel. And when we understand, like, if you don't know you're in a game and you don't know the rules of the game, you're going to suck at playing it. But if you understand the rules of the game and you know how to pilot your vehicle of consciousness and you understand what authentic alignment is, what I'm helping men do is come into awareness and giving them the manual. Unfortunately, men don't like to read manuals, so maybe that's not a good idea. I'm giving them the blueprint. Here you go. How to yourself so that you can reach your full potential, so that you can feel amazing, which sometimes involves feeling not amazing. We're not going to feel amazing all the time. So I don't want to be one of those false teachers who's like, you should just only feel this or that. I want to give them the tools. I want to give them a toolbox, fill it with tools, and teach them how to use the right tool for the right job, because I celebrate the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And I think that together we rise, and together we heal, and together we grow. And right now we're at such an exciting snapshot in evolution. And I think it's just going to move more quickly if we have the right understanding of how it all works and update our software to understand these newer, larger models that religion and mysticism have told us for centuries, that science is now saying, wait a minute, they were right.
Right. Well, that's consciousness. Anything you want to add?
No, I think that's great. Anybody has any questions, please submit questions. Let us know in the comments, hit like, whatever, give us a 5-star rating, whatever you do. We'd like to get this out to more people. And thank you as always, Astra. You're amazing. You ask the best questions, and I appreciate you.
Same goes back to you. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.